I am currently preparing for the next round of revisions on Project Catabasis. That's my gothic fantasy novel. I'm doing a lot of thinking before I begin editing and moving things around in my draft. And as a part of that, I find myself referring to a lot of my favorite tried and true resources that just help me develop story and think about story in different ways. So I thought that I would make a video about it and share some of those with you. And it's a little bit selfish because I would actually love to hear what you, if you were the writerly sort, are currently using. So leave those in the comments for me and everybody else. But if you're new here, my name's Steph. Hello, welcome. I talk about books, reading, and writing them sometimes. And yeah, in this video I'm going to be sharing books, podcasts, and other internet haunts that I have that encourage me and have helped equip me with the skills that I need going forward in my attempt to write a novel. They're all fiction oriented as well. So I'm going to begin with the books. Some of them you might have heard of, some of them maybe not. These are the most, I think, craft heavy, and I have them all currently on ebook because I move a lot and it's just easier that way. The first one I want to mention is Consider This. This is a sort of memoir, series of essays, advice book written by the guy who wrote Fight Club. What makes it kind of different is that it's a collection of advice that he has received over the years that encouraged or changed the way that he wrote for the better. I think this book gives a lot of really practical advice that will be useful or helpful for anybody, no matter what your style or genre is. He shares a lot of insight about writers groups and publishing and just that internal interior process of trying to get the words down on the page, along with some very entertaining anecdotes. The next one that I'm going to talk about, I feel like is the top of everybody's lists these days. That's Save the Cat. It was originally developed by filmmakers, and then they have a book adaptation version of it as well. And this is helpful when I think you're just trying to evaluate or reevaluate what your main story beats are. They break it down into, I think, 9 core types of stories, like Monster in the House. That's kind of my gothic leaning novels beat sheet. And then they let you know, at 30%, this type of thing should probably happen, at 40%, at 50%, so on and so forth. I usually use this as kind of a launching off point when I'm plotting things out or when I'm evaluating what I have after my first draft and what is missing, what is not working. So it can be kind of a helpful diagnostic tool or just a building block. On the flip side of that, I also have Romancing the Beat. This is a very similar kind of beat sheet book. Talks about the beats of a romance novel. And honestly, okay, maybe this is controversial, I don't know. I think everybody who wants to write should be reading romance, at least a little bit. Because it's so formulaic, it is actually a wonderful way to study story. I felt like Romancing the Beat was helpful in developing my romantic subplot, but also that main core story, because it had me thinking about formula and then also ways to play with formula in different ways. The next book that I have to chat about is Character and Viewpoint by Orson Scott Card. I feel like a bit of a hypocrite recommending this book because I haven't read any of Card's books. Ender's Game has been on my list of my TBR forever. I think forever. I can testify that he gives really great advice. In this book, he talks about some of the main types of characters that we have, main issues that we might come across in making these characters believable and not caricatures. And then different kinds of techniques where we can kind of manipulate the reader's perspective or perception of that character. And the last book that I want to mention is The Art of Fiction by Ayn Rand. I think this one's 70 years old. You may already know that Ayn Rand is a philosopher, or was a philosopher, and fiction writer from the 20th century. I had to read her in high school, and I remember reading The Art of Fiction before I really made that decision that I was going to try and write a novel. This was several years ago. I just saw it in the library. And it's very short, it's really skinny. And if I'm remembering correctly, it is essentially a bunch of lectures that she gave from her living room where she's analyzing sort of four main elements: the theme, plot, characterization, and style of a novel, and how to kind of build on those. And it just made it feel really accessible and really exciting. I feel like this one is a little bit more obscure from what I normally see recommended, but I definitely think that it's worth checking out. The next kind of section that I want to talk about are podcasts. So I stumbled across writing podcasts during the pandemic because I didn't have any in real life writer friends, and I was ready to start trying to write my first novel. That is my first drawer novel. But what I really appreciate about podcasts is that it's usually interviews with an author, and where I'm hearing different perspectives and advice and really personal anecdotes about writing that is a little bit more casual than a book that's been edited multiple times over. And my absolute favorite podcast is No Right Way by V.E. Schwab. She started this, as I said, during the pandemic, and her kind of point is that there is no right way to write. As long as you're getting words down on the page, everybody has a different process, and they all can lead to a very similar kind of product or outcome. This podcast just changed the way I feel about writing. V.E. Schwab, who is an author, talking to other authors about what their process is, what their challenges are, the way that they approach these kind of challenges. And yeah, I love listening to authors talking to authors because it's just so much more relaxed and you get more into the nitty gritty than I feel like you do with like a talk show host kind of scenario. They know different kinds of questions to ask and to answer, and I just found this one really encouraging, and it made me a lot more comfortable with thinking about my own process not being perfect the first time, and understanding revision as an integral part of creating the kind of books that I love to read. The other podcast I want to chat about is 88 Cups of Tea. I don't know if they are still interviewing authors, but I think that she is not. But there's a huge kind of compendium. All of the links for this, by the way, are down in the description. But there's like a huge archive of interviews with all kinds of different people. Also some literary agents and people who are like working in the biz of publishing. A lot of the questions and conversations on these podcasts are related to, again, craft and process, but it's a bit more broad, focusing on like creative process than anything else. And I just, yeah, again, found it really interesting to hear what works for different people. It gives me sort of ideas on what works for different people. So highly recommend. And then the next two podcasts that I'm going to talk about, I'm going to kind of talk about in tandem because they're very similar. That is The Writer Files and The London Writers Salon. The Writer Files is Kelton Reid, who is interviewing different kinds of authors and people who are working again in the publishing business. So you get like editors and people in marketing, all kinds of stuff that give a bit more of a broader, well-rounded perspective on what is kind of going on behind the scenes, how different decisions are made, and again, just some writing process things. Similarly, the London Writers Salon does interviews. The interviews that the London Writers Salon does are a little bit longer. I think most of their podcasts are like an hour, and then the Writer Files tends to be shorter with, I think, slightly bigger names, but I mean, that's neither here nor there. And then just in terms of like blogs and other internet haunts, the first one I want to talk about is Susan Dennard's website. She has a ton of resources for free where she discusses how she goes about writing and then also revising her novel. And the revision section in her like little advice area of her website, again linked down below, is so helpful. And it really informed a lot of how I went through my first and second round of revision, because she goes through her manuscript multiple times. She has multiple passes where the first time she'll focus on plot because that's going to change a lot of things. The second time maybe characters, or the third time maybe setting. And that just works really well for my brain, where everything is kind of broken down into steps that are easy, digestible. It's just really, really great. So Susan Dennard, also TV Tropes. I think a lot of people have probably stumbled across this website. If you haven't, here you go. It is like this massive archive of all of the different kinds of tropes that there are on TV and in fiction, and it gives you a bunch of information about how it's already been used in literature and TV, video games, etc. Just use it as a way for me to think about how I could or could not subvert a trope, and also knowing whether the way I'm thinking of subverting it is actually new or novel or interesting, or if it just is new to me and whoop-de-doo. There's also the emotion thesaurus, which is great if you tend to use a lot of the same words to describe the same kind of emotions. This is a paid subscription, but there is a little bit of it that is free. I just use the free part, but what this does is you can select like an emotion that's like humiliation, and it will be like, these are the other words that you can use to describe humiliation. These are the bodily sensations that somebody might feel when they're having embarrassment. Finally, YouTubers. I've only very recently started to watch YouTube writing vlogs and like writers who are on YouTube. The first one that I kind of found YouTube writers through was Christiane Jones. She's pretty popular. She does a lot of very cozy writing vlogs. She just recently got an agent for her novel. Yeah, I think a lot of her content is just sharing her experience and sharing her process, not so much of like the advice. Esme the author is another great channel. Esme is a published author. She has vlogs that are sharing her process for life, and also some videos that are breaking down things like the query letter, her offer of representation, and just shares a lot of really interesting anecdotes and experiences that I think are just interesting in general, but also kind of helpful for people who are, you know, not in the know. And the third channel that I want to briefly mention is Alyssa Metisic. I'm probably mispronouncing that. And she talks about all of the different things that agents are looking for, not looking for, and again, just generally has videos about the publishing industry and ways to improve the quality of your novel, especially if you're somebody who is interested in pursuing traditional publishing at some point in the future. So those are my recommendations. Those are the things that I have been relying on and that I've been referring to a lot. If you have any kind of craft or writing related resources that you find yourself relying on a lot or that you really think are great, please leave them in the comments. I am actively looking for more craft related content and guides, and I would love to hear about them, and I'm sure that anybody else who is watching this video probably would too. So if you've made it to this point in the video, thank you so much for watching. I will be back with another writing video very soon. I have to edit my beta readers, reactions, and like feedback video and put that out there, and it's a lot. I'm excited to share that with you, kind of, but it might be a bit of a longer one, so we'll see. Anyway, thank you for watching. See you soon. Bye-bye.